Fallon held the small white bag close to her chest. She struggled to speak. "Please. My only son is sick and he's having trouble breathing. I just need this one bottle. I'll bring the money tomorrow, I swear." "That's what they all say." The pharmacist's voice was ice cold. The crowd gathering around the pharmacy entrance whispered and stared. Some pulled out phones. Fallon felt ashamed as tears streamed down her cheeks. She was about to be arrested for stealing $127 worth of antibiotics, while her only son lay very sick 3 miles away. She'd hit rock bottom. What Fallon didn't know was that a man standing 15 feet away had just watched the entire thing. A man whose mother had died because she couldn't afford her medication. A man who'd spent 20 years and billions of dollars making sure that what happened to him never happened to anyone else. He was about to do something no one saw coming. But first, she had to survive the next 5 minutes. Have you ever been desperate enough to break the rules for someone you love? This story is about to get even more powerful. Show your support by hitting that like button, and subscribe to see how one act of kindness creates a ripple effect that changes everything. The fluorescent lights at County General Hospital buzzed softly as Dr. Julian Foster walked the halls on his evening shift. At 42, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had seen everything the medical profession could throw at him. His white coat was crisp, his stethoscope draped around his neck like a familiar friend, and dark eyes that made patients trust him the moment they saw them. But unknown to him, something unusual was going to happen. Julian had built an empire on healing. 20 years ago, fresh out of medical school with nothing but student debt and determination, he'd started a small clinic in the roughest and poorest part of Baltimore. Now he owned a network of 17 hospitals across the country, each one bearing his signature philosophy. Healthcare is a human right, not a luxury. Forbes called him the billionaire with a soft heart. Wall Street Journal called him the doctor who refused to forget. But to Julian, he was just a kid from the south side of Chicago who'd watched his mother die because she couldn't afford the cheapest insulin. That memory never left him. It fueled every decision, every expansion, every innovation. Tonight, he was visiting County General unannounced, something he did at all his hospitals. He believed you only saw the truth when people didn't know someone above was watching. He'd just finished speaking with a young resident about a complex cardiac case when he heard it. Commotion near the pharmacy. Voices raised. A woman pleading. Security guards barking orders. Julian's instincts kicked in immediately. He moved toward the sound, his long strides eating up the corridor. Nurses murmured to each other. A few people had gathered near the pharmacy, trying to see what was going on. And in the center of it all stood a security guard gripping the arm of a woman who looked like she was about to burst into tears. She was young, maybe early 30s. Her auburn hair was loose and uneven like she hadn't had time to think about it. Her clothes were a worn denim jacket over a worn sweater and jeans. Her face looked drained from exhaustion, eyes red-rimmed and desperate, and held tight in her free hand was a small white paper bag. "Ma'am, you need to come with me," the security guard said angrily, his voice fierce but not unkind. His name tag read Officer Bryant. "Please," the woman begged, her voice cracking. "Please, I'll bring the money tomorrow. I swear. I just need this tonight. My son, he needs this tonight." "That's what they all say," the pharmacist said quietly, a stern-looking woman in her 50s behind the counter with her arms folded. Julian stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "What's going on here?" Officer Bryant straightened. "Dr. Foster, sir." This woman was caught attempting to leave with medication she hasn't paid for. Standard shoplifting protocol. The woman looked shocked when she heard the name. She looked at Julian like she'd seen him before, or just the resignation of someone who'd been fighting too long and was finally out of moves. "What medication?" Julian asked quietly. The pharmacist held up a bottle. "Amoxicillin. High-dose antibiotics. She has a prescription but no insurance. It cost $127.50. She offered $23 only." Julian looked at the woman. "What's your name?" She didn't answer right away, then said quietly, "Fallon McKenzie." "Tell me about your son, Fallon." Her voice broke. His name is Tucker. He's 18. He has strep throat, but it's gotten worse. The clinic said it might be turning into scarlet fever. They wrote the prescription, but she struggled to speak. I don't get paid until Friday. I tried to explain, but she said I couldn't take it without paying, and I just panicked. I couldn't watch him suffer another night. I couldn't. The pharmacist sighed. We have payment plans. She could have applied. How long does that take? Julian asked, his voice still calm. 2 to 3 business days for approval. And he needs the medication tonight? The pharmacist didn't know how to respond. According to the prescription, yes. But rules are rules, Dr. Foster. Julian turned his full attention to Fallon. Her hands shook as she held the bag. He could see the desperation in tears that streamed down her face. The kind of desperation that made good people do desperate things. What would you do in this moment? Would you walk away or step in? Drop a comment below and let us know. He'd seen that look before. In the mirror years ago when he was a medical student watching his mother's light fade because the system had failed her. Officer Bryant, Julian said quietly. Let her go. The guard blinked. Sir, let her go. I'm covering the medication. Dr. Foster, with all due respect, we have protocols. I'm aware of the protocols, Julian said, his voice gentle but firm. I helped write them. I'm also the owner of this hospital, and I'm telling you to let her go. The guard released Fallon's arm immediately. She stumbled back, holding the bag to her chest, staring at Julian with wide, disbelieving eyes like she had seen her savior. Julian pulled out his wallet and handed the pharmacist his credit card. Charge it, and while you're at it, cancel any incident reports. This matter is closed. The pharmacist took the card reluctantly. She didn't look pleased. Julian turned back to Fallon. That prescription is for 7 days, correct? She nodded mutely. When was the last time your son ate? The question caught her off guard. This afternoon. I made him soup. And you? Fallon looked down. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Her silence was answer enough. Julian made a decision. Come with me. What? Your son needs those antibiotics, but he also needs to be examined. Strep turning into scarlet fever at his age isn't something to ignore. Can still be serious. I want to make sure we're not missing anything. I can't afford the bills. I know how expensive it can be. Fallon said with fear in her voice. I'm not asking you to pay, Julian interrupted gently. I'm asking you to let me do my job. Where is Tucker now? He's home. My neighbor checks in on him when I'm at work, just to be safe. Call her. Tell her you'll be a bit longer. Then you and I are going to pick up your son and bring him back here for a proper examination. Fallon stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. Why would you do this? Julian looked at her, and in that moment, he saw past the desperation and fear. He saw a mother who would do anything for her child. He saw strength wrapped in exhaustion, love wrapped in poverty, dignity wrapped in shame. He saw someone worth helping. Because someone should have done it for my mother, he said quietly. Now make the call. 20 minutes later, Julian found himself in the passenger seat of his own Mercedes. He'd insisted she drive since she knew the way. Fallon, who sat rigid behind the wheel, was clearly terrified of damaging the expensive car. They drove through the streets that grew progressively rougher. Streetlights barely worked, and the buildings looked very old. This was the Baltimore that tourists never saw, the Baltimore that Julian had specifically chosen to build his first hospital. Fallon pulled up in front of a sagging apartment complex. The paint was peeling, several windows were boarded up, and a group of teenagers eyed the Mercedes with open interest. I'll just be a minute, Fallon said quickly, already opening the door. I'm coming with you, Julian said. That's not necessary. Fallon. He waited until she looked at him. Let me help. That's all I want to do. Help. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, the stairwell smelling of old cigarette smoke and mildew. Fallon knocked on a door marked 3C. An elderly Asian woman opened it, her weathered face creasing with concern when she saw Fallon. You got the medicine? Mrs. Huang asked in accented English. I got it. How is he? Sleeping now, but still hot. Very hot. They stepped inside the small apartment. It was immaculate despite its age. Everything was clean and organized, though clearly secondhand. Family photos were taped along one wall. A small TV played on mute in the corner. On the couch, Tucker lay curled under a blanket, sweat shining on his forehead, his breathing unstable. Fallon sat beside him and checked his temperature with her hand. His eyes opened halfway. You're back? Yes, I brought a doctor. He's going to take a look at you. This is Dr. Foster. Julian knelt beside the couch, calm and focused. I'm here to help. I hear you've been feeling awful. Let me check you. My throat hurts really bad. I bet it does. Would it be okay if I took a look? Tucker gave a weak nod. Julian conducted a thorough examination. His experienced hands gentle but efficient. His fever was high. His throat was badly inflamed, and his pulse was fast. A fine red rash was beginning to appear on Tucker's chest. Fallon, Julian said carefully, I need to be honest with you. Tucker needs to come back to the hospital. The antibiotics will help, but he's showing signs of a respiratory complication. I want him on 4 antibiotics and monitored overnight, maybe longer. He saw her tense up. The calculation, the impossibility of it. I can't. You're not hearing me, Julian said gently. I'm not asking you to pay. Tucker needs medical care and he's going to get it. The only question is whether you trust me enough to let me provide it. Fallon looked at her son, at how sick he still looked. Then she looked at Julian, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and turned her worst day into something she couldn't quite comprehend. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Julian thought of his mother, of watching her struggle to breathe in a free clinic because the hospitals wouldn't admit her without insurance. He remembered holding her hand as she died, knowing it didn't have to be this way. Because I can, he said simply. Nobody should be denied a second chance, especially not when help is this close. Fallon started to cry. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mrs. Huang moved quietly to put a comforting hand on her shoulder. This story is just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. If you think Dr. Foster has an ulterior motive, smash that like button, drop a comment telling us what you think of him so far, and make sure you're subscribed. The second half of this story will leave you speechless. Within the next 2 hours, Tucker was settled in a private room at County General. For in his arm, oxygen cannula in his nose, monitors beeping steadily. The nurse, a kind woman named Rita, had promised to personally oversee his care. Fallon sat in the chair beside his bed, holding his hand even as he drifted into a more peaceful sleep than he'd had in days. Julian stood in the doorway watching. He should leave. He had early surgery in the morning, but he couldn't imagine leaving them alone. Dr. Foster? He turned to find Rita approaching with a tablet. Yes. I need someone to sign as the guarantor for Tucker McKenzie's admission. Julian took the tablet and signed his name without hesitation. Send all bills to my office. And Rita, I want hourly updates on his condition. Of course, sir. Julian looked back into the room. Fallon had laid her head on the edge of Tucker's bed, one hand still holding his, clearly exhausted. He made another decision. Have someone bring her a cot, blankets, and a meal. She's not leaving her son's side, and she needs to eat. Right away, Dr. Foster. As Julian finally left the hospital, stepping out into the cool Baltimore night, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Bethany? It's Julian. I need you to clear my morning schedule. No, everything's fine. Actually, everything's better than fine. I just need to handle something important. I'll explain tomorrow. He ended the call and stood there for a moment. The city was still busy. Sirens in distance, traffic, the hum of life continuing regardless of individual struggles. But somewhere up on the 4th floor, Fallon's son's breathing had settled, because someone had been in the right place at the right time with the power to help. And for Julian Foster, that was worth more than all the billions in his bank account. He didn't know yet, but this was just the beginning. The beginning of a story that would challenge everything he thought he knew about saving life, about purpose, and about the kind of wealth that truly mattered. The story of how a desperate act in a hospital pharmacy would change 2 lives forever. 3 days later, Tucker was remarkably better. The antibiotics had done their job, the respiratory inflammation had resolved, and Tucker's natural resilience had done the rest. He sat up in bed, distracted by a game on his phone, looking better than before. Fallon hadn't left his side except for quick trips to the bathroom and the one shower Rita had insisted she take. She'd slept fitfully on the cot, jerking awake at every beep of the monitors, but gradually allowing herself to believe that her son was going to be okay. Dr. Foster visited twice a day, though Fallon suspected he had no medical reason to do so. He was the hospital owner, not Tucker's attending physician. Yet he came, checking Tucker's chart, asking questions and making him laugh with terrible dad jokes. "What's the best way to watch a fly fishing tournament?" Julian asked on the 3rd morning. Tucker smiled. "What? Live stream." Tucker dissolved into laughter despite the joke being objectively terrible. Fallon found herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. "Dr. Foster," she said as he prepared to leave, "can we talk?" "Outside." They stepped into the hallway. Fallon twisted her hands together, struggling to find words. "I don't know how to thank you," she began. "You don't need to. Please, let me finish." She took a breath. "I need to know what I owe. I need to understand what's expected. I can set up a payment plan. It might take years, but I'll pay every penny. I just need to know the number." Julian looked at her carefully. "You don't owe anything, Fallon. That's not possible. 3 days in a private room, for antibiotics, around-the-clock monitoring, the doctors, the tests, all covered. By what? Some charity program I don't know about." "By me," Julian said simply. "Personally." Fallon stared at him in disbelief. "Why? Does there have to be a reason beyond the fact that your son needed help?" "People don't just do this," Fallon said, her voice rising slightly. "There's always a catch. Always something expected in return. I'm not most people. You're a billionaire doctor who happens to own this hospital and just decided to cover tens of thousands of dollars in medical bills for a complete stranger? Forgive me if I'm having trouble accepting that at face value." Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he gestured to a small waiting area nearby. "Can we sit?" They settled into uncomfortable plastic chairs. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When I was in medical school," he began, "my mother got sick from diabetes like millions of Americans. It's manageable with medication and care. But she'd lost her job, lost her insurance, and couldn't afford insulin." Fallon listened, seeing the pain in his eyes. "She tried to ration it and make it last. I was drowning in student loans, working 3 jobs just to keep my head above water. I couldn't help her financially. I tried to find programs, clinics, anything. But the system," he shook his head. "The system failed her. I watched her get sicker. Watched her try to hide it from me because she didn't want me to worry. And then one night, she went into diabetic ketoacidosis." "I'm sorry," Fallon whispered. "She died in a free clinic." Julian took a breath before speaking. "Died because she couldn't afford a medication that costs pennies to produce but hundreds to purchase. I was in my 2nd year of medical school, learning about saving lives, while my mother died from something completely preventable." He looked at Fallon directly. "I swore that day that if I ever had the power to stop that from happening to someone else, I would every single time." Fallon struggled to keep her composure. "I still can't just accept." "Then don't accept it as charity," Julian said. "Accept it as me honoring my mother's memory. Accept it as me doing what someone should have done for her. Accept it however you need to. But Tucker must get well, and you won't go into debt for the rest of your life trying to pay medical bills. That's non-negotiable." They sat in silence for a moment. A nurse walked by. A patient called out for assistance down the hall. The hospital continued its rhythm around them. "There's something else," Julian said. "Tucker's going to need follow-up care. Regular checkups to make sure the scarlet fever hasn't caused any lasting damage. And you need to see a doctor yourself." "I'm fine." "You're malnourished and exhausted. When's the last time you had a physical? Fallon looked away. I don't have time for doctors. Make time. Because Tucker needs his mother healthy, and you can't take care of him if you collapse. Before Fallon could argue, Julian's phone buzzed. He looked at his phone screen and frowned. I'm sorry, I need to take this. We'll talk more later. He stood and walked down the hall, phone to his ear. Fallon watched him go. This mysterious man who'd appeared in her life like something from a fairy tale she'd stopped believing in years ago. She went back to Tucker's room. Her son was awake now, looking much more like himself. Hey Mom, Dr. Foster said, maybe tomorrow I can go home. Really? Fallon said, squeezing his hand. Yes, so, I handled it well, right? The bravest, she said, kissing his forehead. The absolute bravest. Tucker went back to playing his video games. Fallon sat in the chair and watched him, her mind wandering about. She thought about the past 3 years since Tucker's father had left. Thought about the endless string of minimum-wage jobs. The nights she'd cried quietly in the bathroom so Tucker wouldn't hear. The gut-wrenching choices between groceries and rent. She thought about the moment in the pharmacy when she'd made the decision to just take the medication. The shame that had burned through her. The terror when the security guard grabbed her arm. And then this man had appeared. Had seen her at her absolute lowest and hadn't judged, hadn't condemned, had simply helped. She didn't understand it. But sitting there watching her son's healthy color return, hearing his breathing clear, she felt a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Tucker was discharged the next afternoon with strict instructions for follow-up care and a prescription for a few more days of oral antibiotics. Fallon stood in the pharmacy, the same pharmacy where this had all started, waiting for the medication. When the pharmacist called her name, Fallon approached the counter cautiously. The pharmacist, the same stern woman from before, looked at her with pity. Tucker McKenzie? Yes. She handed over the medication. It's already been paid for. Dr. Foster's orders. Fallon took the bag with shaking hands. Thank you. The pharmacist hesitated, then said quietly, I owe you an apology. I was just following protocol, but I should have tried harder to find a solution. I'm sorry. Fallon was so surprised she almost dropped the bag. Thank you. She returned to Tucker's room where a nurse was removing his fore and going over discharge instructions. Julian appeared in the doorway just as they were finishing. Perfect timing, he said with a smile. Ready to go home, Tucker? Tucker smiled excitedly. Yes. Can I go out with some friends when we get home? We'll see, Fallon said, but she was smiling. Julian pulled out his phone and tapped a few times. I've arranged a car service to take you home. Should be waiting out front. Dr. Foster, you've already done too much. It's just a ride, Fallon. Let me do this one last thing. But it wasn't the last thing. When they got downstairs, Julian walked them out to the car. Before they got in, he handed Fallon an envelope. What's this? Information about our follow-up clinic. Tucker has an appointment next week. Also included is a referral for you to see one of our internal medicine doctors. No charge. It's already arranged. Dr. Foster. Julian. Please, just call me Julian. She looked up at him. This man who'd somehow turned her worst moment into something resembling a miracle. Why us? She asked softly. You must see dozens of people like us every day. Why did you stop for us? Julian thought about that question. About timing and chance and the hundreds of small decisions that led to that exact moment in the pharmacy. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I saw my mother in you. Maybe I saw myself in Tucker. Or maybe, he paused. Maybe the universe just knew you needed someone to care, and I happened to be there. Julian pulled Fallon into a brief hug, then rested a hand on Tucker's shoulder. When Tucker pulled away, he said seriously, You're a good doctor. Thank you for making me better. Julian felt his throat tighten. You're very welcome, Tucker. You're very strong. They got into the car. As it pulled away, Tucker waved enthusiastically out the window. Julian waved back, watching until the car disappeared from view. He stood there for a moment, the late afternoon sun warm on his face. His phone notification rang, probably his assistant wondering where he was for his next meeting. But he ignored it for just a few more seconds. He realized this wasn't just another case. He'd helped countless people over the years, donated millions to medical charities, built hospitals in underserved communities. But this felt different. He'd seen Fallon's desperation, her love for her son, her willingness to sacrifice everything for him. He'd seen Tucker's resilience, his trust, his pure-hearted gratitude. And for the first time in years, Julian had felt truly connected to why he'd become a doctor in the first place. Not for the money, though that had come. Not for the prestige, though he had that too. But for moments exactly like this. For the privilege of being able to say yes when the world had told someone no. For the power to turn someone's worst day into the beginning of something better. He pulled out his phone finally, scrolling past missed calls and urgent messages, until he found what he was looking for. A photo from years ago. His mother, smiling despite her illness. Her eyes full of the same love he'd seen in Fallon's when she looked at Tucker. "I think you would have liked them, Mom," he said softly. "I think you would have told me I did the right thing." The wind picked up, rustling the trees nearby, and Julian chose to believe it was his answer. He headed back inside, back to his meetings and responsibilities, back to the empire he'd built. But something had changed. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a story that would transform everything. Because kindness has a way of echoing, of rippling outward in ways you can't predict or control. And the simple act of helping one desperate mother and her sick child was about to create waves that would change more lives than Julian Foster could possibly imagine, including his own. 2 weeks passed. Julian resumed fully to work, but he found his thoughts drifting more often than he cared to admit. Board meetings blurred together. Financial reports sat unread on his desk. He'd catch himself staring out his office window, thinking about Tucker and his mother who'd been willing to risk everything for him. His assistant, Bethany, noticed. "You've checked your watch 4 times in the last 10 minutes, she observed from the doorway of his office. "The follow-up appointment is at 3. You have 2 hours. Julian looked up, caught. "I wasn't. Please. I've worked for you for 8 years. I know when something's on your mind." She smiled. "It's nice to see, actually. You've been so focused on numbers and expansion lately. It's good to remember why we do all this." "I haven't forgotten. Haven't you?" Bethany challenged gently. "When's the last time you saw a patient just because you wanted to, not because they were a VIP or a publicity opportunity? When's the last time you practiced medicine for the joy of it?" Julian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She had a point. At 2:45, he found himself in the family medicine wing of County General, reviewing Tucker McKenzie's chart. He had been doing well according to the notes. No complications. Fever gone. Energy returning. The follow-up was just a precaution, but Julian had insisted on being present. At 2:58, he heard Tucker's voice echoing down the hallway. "Is Dr. Foster here?" Julian smiled despite himself. He stepped out of the examination room just as Fallon rounded the corner. Tucker walked slowly beside her. The change in both of them was remarkable. Tucker looked healthier, and Fallon, she stood straighter somehow. The exhaustion in her eyes had faded, though wariness still lingered there. "Dr. Foster," Tucker said, stepping toward him. "I'm here for the follow-up." "I can see that," Julian said warmly. "And I've been preparing my worst jokes just for you." "Oh no," Fallon said, but she was smiling. They moved into the examination room. Tucker took a seat on the exam table. Julian went through a thorough examination asking about how he'd been feeling and whether anything had changed. Julian's hands moved with precision on his stethoscope. He glanced at Fallon, who was looking at her son with such pride and love it was almost painful to witness. The examination confirmed what the chart had indicated. Tucker was fully recovered. No lasting damage from the scarlet fever. His heart was strong, lungs clear, throat healed. "You're officially my healthiest patient," Julian declared. Julian reached into a drawer and pulled out a standard recovery clearance form, scribbled Tucker's name across the top, then signed it with deliberate care. He handed it over with a faint smile. "Tucker McKenzie," he said calmly. "You're officially cleared. Infection resolved. Recovery on track." Tucker took the paper, reading it slowly, then folded it once and held it carefully. "Mind if I show Mrs. Huang? She's been worrying about me." "Absolutely," Fallon said. She turned to Julian. "Thank you. For everything. For this? For..." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the past 2 weeks, the hospital stay, the miracle of her son's recovery. "Just doing my job," Julian said, but his voice was soft. "No," Fallon said firmly. "You went way beyond your job. We both know that." An awkward silence fell. Tucker, oblivious, was studying his certificate with intense focus. "So," Julian said, clearing his throat, "your appointment, the one for you." Fallon's expression shuddered immediately. "I canceled it." "Fallon, I'm fine. Tucker's better, and that's what matters. I don't need." "When's the last time you ate today?" She blinked at the sudden question. "I had coffee this morning. It's 3 in the afternoon. I'll eat when I get home." "What about yesterday?" Fallon looked away. "I don't see how that's relevant." Julian pulled out his phone and tapped a few times. "There's a cafe on the 2nd floor. Good sandwiches, soup, coffee that's actually drinkable. I'm buying you lunch." "Dr. Foster." "Julian, and I'm not asking." "Tucker, you want to help me convince your mom to eat?" Tucker watched them for a moment. "Mom, you should eat something." "Traitor," Fallon muttered, but there was no heat in it. 20 minutes later, they were seated at a small table in the hospital cafe. Tucker was eating quietly, focused on his food. Fallon sat with an untouched turkey club in front of her, watching her son with soft eyes. Fallon picked up half the sandwich and took a small bite. Then another. Then she was eating in earnest, like someone who hadn't realized how hungry they were until food was in front of them. Julian pretended not to notice, focusing on his own meal and asking Tucker about his favorite places to visit. But he was acutely aware of Fallon beside him. The way she ate quickly, like someone used to scarfing food during short breaks. The way she kept one eye always on Tucker. The way she held herself, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. "So," Julian said when they'd all finished, "now that Tucker's cleared, I want to talk about the follow-up plan." Fallon tensed immediately. "What follow-up plan?" "Standard protocol for scarlet fever cases. We monitor for potential complications, rheumatic fever, kidney issues. Nothing to worry about, just precautionary. Tucker will need checkups at 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. I can take him to a regular clinic, or you can bring him here, where I can personally ensure he's getting the best care." Julian paused. "No charge, Fallon. These are included in the initial treatment." She studied him suspiciously. "Why do I feel like you're making that up?" "I'm not making it up," Julian said, which was technically true. He'd instituted the policy about 30 seconds ago, but it was now official hospital protocol as far as he was concerned. "And while we're at it, you need that physical. When's the last time you had blood work done?" "I don't." "Years, I'm guessing." "Fallon, you can't pour from an empty cup. Tucker needs you healthy." She was quiet for a long moment. Tucker had drifted out of the conversation, focused on his phone. "I'm scared," Fallon finally said, so quietly Julian almost missed it. "Of what?" "Of what you'll find. Of being told I have something wrong that I can't afford to fix or leaving Tucker alone." Julian's heart started beating faster. "That's not going to happen. You can't promise that." "No," he admitted. "I can't promise you won't have health issues, but I can promise that whatever we find, we'll deal with it together, and that you won't go through it alone or broke." "Why?" The word burst out of her, raw and desperate. "Why do you care so much? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why?" Julian was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Around them, the cafe continued its normal rhythm, medical staff grabbing coffee, visitors seeking comfort food, the everyday life of a hospital. Do you know how many people I see every year? He finally asked. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Patients, families, staff. And I care about all of them in the abstract. I fund programs, I make policies. I try to create systems that help as many people as possible. He paused. But every once in a while, someone reminds me why I'm doing all of this. They cut through the abstractions and the spreadsheets and the board meetings, and they make it real again. They remind me that behind every statistic is a person. A mother who loves her son and a young man who deserves a real chance. He looked at Fallon directly. You did that. You and Tucker. You reminded me what this is actually about. Fallon's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back fiercely. I don't know how to accept this. I've spent so long fighting for everything, being told no at every turn. Someone saying yes without conditions, without expecting something back. I don't know how to process that. Then don't process it, Julian said gently. Just let it happen. Let someone help. Let yourself rest for 5 minutes. Let Tucker worry about his own life, not on how hard things have been for you. A tear escaped, rolling down Fallon's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, glancing at Tucker to make sure he hadn't noticed. But Tucker wasn't paying attention anymore. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do the physical. But that's it. I can't keep taking from you. You're not taking. I'm giving. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Julian's phone rang. He looked at the notification and sighed. I'm sorry. I have a meeting I can't miss. But Fallon, please, schedule that appointment. For Tucker, if not for yourself. I will, she said, and this time he believed her. Julian gave Tucker a soft tap on the shoulder. Take care of your mom, okay? I will, Tucker promised solemnly. And you have to tell me another joke next time. Deal. Julian walked away, weaving through the cafe tables, but he could feel Fallon's eyes on him. Fallon scheduled her appointment for the following week. She almost canceled 3 times, but each time, she thought about Julian's words. Tucker needs you healthy. And she thought about Tucker's messages, about the trust in her son's eyes when he looked at Dr. Foster. She thought about how Julian had looked at her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with simple human compassion. Like she mattered, like she was worth the effort. So she went. Dr. Miranda Torres, the internist Julian had referred her to, was a petite woman with beautiful eyes and a no-nonsense manner that Fallon appreciated. She didn't treat Fallon like a charity case or a problem to be solved. She treated her like a patient who deserved care. The examination was thorough, too thorough in Fallon's opinion. Blood pressure, blood work, listening to her heart and lungs, asking detailed questions about her medical history, her diet, her stress levels. When you say you sometimes skip meals, Dr. Torres said carefully, how often are we talking? Fallon shifted uncomfortably on the exam table. I don't know. A few times a week. And by a few, you mean? Most days, Fallon admitted quietly. Tucker eats. That's what matters. I eat when there's enough. Dr. Torres made a note, her expression neutral. Any dizziness? Fatigue. I work 2 jobs and my son's been sick. I'm always tired. Fair point. Any chest pain? Shortness of breath. Sometimes. But that's just stress, right? Maybe. Or it could be anemia, malnutrition, thyroid issues, cardiac concerns. Dr. Torres looked up. That's why we run tests, so we know what we're dealing with. The blood work came back 3 days later. Fallon was at work, her day shift at the diner, when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her step into the back alley and pick up. Miss McKenzie? This is Dr. Torres. Fallon's heart stopped. Is something wrong? I'd like you to come in to discuss your results. Can you make it this afternoon? I'm at work until 6. I'll be here. Come by whenever you can. She struggled to focus for the rest of her shift. Every possible catastrophe ran through her mind. Cancer, heart disease, something terminal, something that would leave Tucker orphaned. By the time she got to the hospital, after walking the 1.5 miles because the bus fare seemed like an unnecessary expense, She'd worked herself into a quiet panic. Dr. Torres met her in her office, a small space filled with medical books and photos of her own family. She gestured for Fallon to sit. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be stressful." "Just tell me," Fallon said. "Whatever it is, just tell me." Dr. Torres opened the file. "You're severely anemic. Your iron levels are dangerously low. You're also showing signs of malnutrition, particularly vitamin D, B12, and protein deficiency. Your thyroid function is borderline concerning. And your blood pressure is higher than I'd like to see in someone your age." Fallon's hands clenched in her lap. "What does that mean?" "It means your body is running on empty. You're not eating enough, not getting proper nutrition, and your health is suffering for it. Left untreated, this could lead to serious complications. Heart problems, immune deficiency, cognitive issues. Can it be fixed?" Fallon asked, her voice small. "Absolutely. With proper nutrition, supplements, and monitoring. But Fallon, you have to actually do it. You can't keep sacrificing your health for Tucker's sake. Because if something happens to you, where does that leave him?" It was the same argument Julian had made, but hearing it from a doctor in the context of actual medical results made it real. Terrifyingly real. "I don't." Fallon's voice cracked. "I don't have money for supplements, for better food. I'm barely keeping us afloat as it is." "Dr. Foster thought you might say that." Dr. Torres pulled out another folder. "He's arranged for you to receive 3 months of supplements through the hospital pharmacy. No charge. And he wanted me to give you this." She handed Fallon an envelope. Inside was a gift card to a local grocery store. For $500. Fallon stared at it, her vision blurring. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" Because She couldn't finish the sentence. Because she didn't deserve it? Because it felt like charity? Because accepting meant acknowledging just how bad things had gotten? "Fallon," Dr. Torres said gently. "I've worked with Dr. Foster for 5 years. He doesn't do anything halfway. When he decides to help someone, he commits. Fighting it won't change that. It'll just make you both miserable. He barely knows me. Maybe. But he knows what it's like to watch someone suffer needlessly. And he's in a position to prevent that. Let him." Fallon clutched the gift card, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't understand why he cares." Dr. Torres smiled. "Have you asked him? He gives these vague answers about his mother, about doing what's right. Then maybe that's your answer. Maybe he's exactly what he appears to be. A good man trying to do good things." It seemed too simple, too fairy tale. But sitting there with proof of how badly she'd neglected her own health, with the means to fix it literally in her hands, Fallon felt something shift inside her. Maybe it was okay to accept help. Maybe it didn't make her weak or dependent. Maybe it just made her human. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." That night, while Tucker was busy playing games as usual, Fallon sat on her threadbare couch and pulled out her phone. She'd saved Julian's number from when he texted her Tucker's follow-up appointment details. She typed and deleted 4 different messages before finally settling on something simple. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how to repay you, but I promise I won't waste this chance you've given us." She hit send before she could overthink it, then immediately regretted it. Too emotional. Too personal. He probably wouldn't even. Her phone rang out. "You don't repay kindness. You pay it forward. Take care of yourself and Tucker. That's all I ask." Then, a moment later, another message, "And maybe let me know how you're doing once in a while. If you want to." Fallon stared at those words. The casual invitation. The implicit suggestion that this wasn't over, that whatever connection had formed between them didn't have to end just because Tucker was healthy. She thought about all the reasons she should keep her distance. He was a billionaire. She was barely scraping by. He owned hospitals. She cleaned them. He was sophisticated, educated, successful. She was a single mother with a GED and 2 minimum wage jobs. But then she thought about how he'd looked at Tucker with genuine affection. How he'd listened to her fears without dismissing them. How he'd seen her at her absolute worst and still treated her with dignity. She typed back, I'd like that. And even though it was terrifying, even though it made no logical sense, even though she had no idea where this could possibly go, Fallon meant it. Because sometimes, kindness doesn't just save lives. Sometimes it changes them completely. The story of Dr. Julian Foster and Fallon McKenzie was just beginning. But it had started exactly the way all meaningful stories do. With someone seeing someone else, and choosing compassion over indifference. Choosing to help because they could. Because it mattered. Because in the end, we're all just human beings trying to make it through. And sometimes the only thing that separates drowning from surviving is someone willing to extend a hand. And hope, as it turns out, is the most valuable currency of all. Before you go, ask yourself, when was the last time you helped someone without expecting anything back? This story reminds us that wealth isn't just money. It's compassion, dignity, and the courage to care. If Fallon's story brought a smile on your face, like this video. If you want more stories that restore your faith in humanity, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who's struggling right now and needs to know they're not alone and that help is coming. Comment below and tell us your own story of unexpected kindness. We'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes all it takes is one person who cares. Be that person. Remain blessed.